Ooh. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the stream. I'm hoping that you can hear me and that we have no tech issues. That would be exciting. Please do let me know. Um, I'm going to just wait to see if I can hear it. I can hear myself on Twitch. I sound the right pitch. Let's see if YouTube is caught up yet. Twitch has way lower latency. Please do let me know. Okay, yes, wicked. Right. How is everyone doing? Thank you very much, Jas, for the 20 Australian dollars. Hi to you. I hope you are well, or as well as you can be in the current state of the world. Good evening, everyone. Yes, Katie Montgomery is spelt with a Y on the KT and an IE on the Montgomery, just to make it confusing for everyone. It's the opposite way around to what everyone thinks it should be spelt, but everyone is wrong. That's the theme of my life. Everyone else is wrong. Yeah, YouTube ads are incredibly annoying. Sorry, you've got to deal with that. There's nothing I can do about that. Yeah, we are living in dark times. That is unfortunate indeed. It's been pretty garbage. We're going to talk through some of the stuff. Just sort of see how chat was doing first. Just say hello to everyone. We've got some things lined to talk about. Should be a good show. And I also hope everyone has been enjoying the video clips I made from the last show. They seem to have been doing all right numbers-wise, so I hope you're enjoying them. Or I hope some of you are watching them. I don't know, maybe none of you are watching them, and you're just the people who turn up to the live streams, and there's a totally different crowd who turns up to the for the clips. But that'd be great. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, let's get into some stuff. The first thing I want to do is a little celebration. We're going to start off with some good news. Then we're going to have a bit of a rant. Then we're going to talk about some horrible things. And then we'll perhaps end on a thing we can do. There's going to be a couple of things we can do this week. So, but the first thing we're going to talk about is a little celebration because this channel, my main and only channel, reached 20,000 subscribers. Hooray! Thank you everyone who is watching, who is subscribed, and everyone who isn't, you get to be you get the chance to be part of the first 30,000 people to subscribe to me. It's not a huge number, but it's a good start. I'm very proud to have got here and pleased, and yeah. Thank you very much for following and watching. I hope you like the stuff, and I would appreciate all of your feedback. If you have any on this channel and what we can do to make it better in the future. But thank you very much. Yeah, that's amazing. So another thing that I wanted to talk about is yes, it is pretty grim at the moment, particularly watching the American news. I mean, it's grim if you're in America. Trump has obviously just got sworn in, and his first thing, I'm not quite sure why fascists' first thing to do. I mean, actually, I do know why. Fascists' first thing that they do at the moment is attack trans people. Donald Trump's just done it. Viktor Orban did it when he got in power. And it was actually one of the first things the Nazis did was to burn down research into trans and intersex people in the Weimar Republic. So it's a thing they do. And it's because we are one of the easiest targets. We can't fight back. We have like no institutional power. It's very easy to turn hordes of people against a minority who don't have a voice when there's like centuries of propaganda and conditioning to make people ready to turn against us. So that's why he's doing it. I don't actually think Donald Trump himself cares at all. Either way, like if it was politically convenient for him to support trans people, then he would do. But it's not, and so he's just doing this. But I think one of the important things to do is to not follow every single possible news story all the time. It is important for you, if you are in the USA, to have a plan. Um, if you're in one of the worst states, to be safe or to get out of there if you can and if you need to. I think it's very conditional on where you live, how much money you have, what your family and job situation is. But I do think you need to get your ducks in order, or whatever the phrase is. Whatever you can do now, do it. They're going to try and stop you from changing your names, your passports, everything. So just try and get everything in order. But don't have your, like, don't doom scroll 24/7, because a lot of the things you'll see them, some Republican somewhere will announce, oh, we're going to try and eradicate trans people from the earth or something. And then all the news sites will be very like in a frenzy to try and report it, because they love reporting that kind of thing because they hate trans people. But then lots of it won't happen, or it will happen in such an incompetent way that they'll fail to actually affect most people, or it'll get struck down by the courts. Or there are so many possible things. We see this in the UK too. There was a amendment put on a bill today where they're trying to undermine trans people's privacy. And if you just see the news, like the right-wing papers will be like, current government decides to remove trans people's privacy, or they'll frame it as like protecting women in some way. But this bill in the UK still has multiple stages through Parliament, and it's weeks, months, years away from doing anything, and there's loads of room for it to be pulled apart. And it's the same in the USA. I know that your court system are kind of falling apart and are getting more corrupt, but that doesn't mean that the whole thing is gonna just give in. And just remember that fascists are incompetent. But yeah, I think when you keep reading all the negative stuff, it's very easy to panic. If it was just if everything was just totally normal and fine, and then they said, oh, there's a possibility in the future that they might try and take away trans people's passports, then that would be terrifying. But it'd be one thing that you could focus on, and you could have a backup plan for, and you can work around, and we could campaign for. But the thing is, they announced that, and then 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, and we're going to try and take away healthcare. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, and we're going to try and ban you from sport. And, oh, we're also going to try and arrest you for walking down the street and things. And there's too many things at once to focus on. It feels like this, like, impending wave of inevitable crushing death, basically. But that isn't the reality of it. And this isn't me being like some delusional, like, oh, it's all going to be fine, but actually I'm, a rich white person in a different country, so stop complaining. And that is true to an extent. But, I am experiencing the panic and the terror as much as anyone else, both for myself in my own country about what's happening here, and for my friends and just other people in other countries. There is real dangers. It's a real serious issue, and it's going to get worse for a while. But it isn't so bad that you should just give in to the fear and panic and do nothing, which is exactly what they want you to do, and exactly what some people will do. Some of you, when faced with stress, your reaction will be to do something about it straight away. But I think a lot of people are like me, where when there's too many things at once, it is overwhelming to the point where your brain just like locks up and you cannot handle it. So you need to focus on the rest of your life. Make sure you have breaks. Make sure you don't believe every single story. Like, just because it's in the Times or the New York Times or the Telegraph or whatever, they lie about trans stuff all the time. I was just going through some of my old videos to make thumbnails for them, and I encountered that the Times had, the UK Times had some headlines saying 1,000 families to sue the gender clinic for children in the UK. That never happened. But that was a headline. They were like, 1,000 families to sue. That's now like a core part of gender critical law, where they're like, remember when 1,000 families sued? None of them did. There was literally zero. And the story, which presented as truth in the newspaper, was based on a fragment of truth, which was some legal representation company had said maybe there are as much as 1,000 people out there who might want to sue, and then it turns out the actual number is 0. But they were being optimistic and trying to sell their services. But it's the same with all of this. Yes, they're gonna try and stop trans people from updating their passports in the US, and some news outlets will report that as removing trans people's passports. At the moment, there's no news that they're going to remove passports people already have. Today, they have not yet stopped it, so you can apply today to change them. And it might not go through. There might be court, injunctions. There's so many things that can still happen. Don't be immobilized by fear. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. But the reason I wanted to talk about this, and I hope this isn't a jarring, change of pace, but I have personally been feeling the dread and the horror and the fear. But I've really been going out of my way to try and not be overwhelmed by it. And to do that, I have been focusing on my hobbies. But not solely. The reason I'm back here on YouTube, because I feel like, and on Blue Sky and various other places, is because I feel like I need to do something. But I can't only do activism because it burns me out. So I have also been doing hobbies, just trying to have some kind of work-life facing the horrific void balance, as trans people do. We don't just get work-life balance, we get work-life and Lovecraftian horror as the three things to balance. But you do need a mix of all of those, I think. And so I just did want to point out some more good news for me. I don't know. It's not that exciting for anyone else. But I think it's a good story to just show that trans people can also live just normal lives. I mean, maybe I'm not that normal because what I did over the weekend was go to the UK regional championships and compete competitively for Pokemon cards. Yep, the cards that came out in the 90s, they're still going, people are still playing it, and there are big organized tournaments. There was 2,500 plus people, or 2,500 plus masters, which is 18 plus or whatever, which is the biggest regional championships ever so far, but they seem to say that every single time at the moment. And I competed, and I did my best ever, which I'm really proud of and really pleased with. I feel like I worked really hard to do it. I managed to get through to day 2 of the tournament, which is the kind of achievement that people who are quite good at the game but not the super pros have. The way the system works is there's day 1 of the tournament, and you do 8 or 9 rounds. It's 10 or 11 hours worth of playing Pokemon cards intensely with people who are good at the game. And then if you get a certain number of wins, then you go through to day 2. In this case, there was 8 rounds, best of 3, 50 minutes each round. And if you win 6 of them, then you go through to the next day. So I managed to win 6 out of 8 of my rounds. And the set of Pokemon cards that I was using, the deck that I was playing, was this one, which I've laid out nicely here with a nice little sleeping Bulbasaur at the top. If you don't know anything about Pokemon, that's totally fine. I'm not going to spend ages on this because I'm going to talk about why it was good from a trans perspective. But just in case anyone's interested, my deck is based around Terapagos, Noctowl, and Dusknoir, with some other support from some other guys who do some stuff. And the idea of the deck is it just goes fast and kills things very quickly. Or makes them faint, sorry. We don't kill things in Pokemon. But, yeah. So I did well, and I was really pleased. In the second day, I did kind of rubbish, but it's because I had achieved my goal, and I just kind of checked out, and I was just like, I'm going to have a good time. But I actually had an amazing weekend. I went there with my friends and, team of people that we have who play Pokemon cards. There's a big diverse range of people, and I met loads of new people because every round you get paired against like someone from around the world. People travel from all over the world to play at these events. I played against people from all across Europe, and in other events I played from people from South America and Japan and like all kinds of places. And almost every person I've ever encountered has been not just like fine, but like a really nice person who I could be friends with. I've had a few people who are like either a bit rude or a bit awkward, but I've never had anyone who's been disrespectful, or bigoted or like abrasive. I've just had good experiences at these things. And when you do encounter someone who's a bit rude or like uninterested in talking to you or whatever, that kind of stands out. And this weekend, I actually got paired against 3 different people whose names I knew, who were like huge big time players, including the current Latin American international champion. And you know, these people are like celebrities in the Pokemon cards world, which is absolutely tiny. So they're not like celebrities. Like, it's quite funny, but if you have like 5,000 followers on any social media platform in the Pokemon world, then you're a big, like, everyone knows you. So it's a small little community, but it's still fully international. And like, I came up against these people and they could have been smug or up themselves or dismissive of me, and none of them were. All 3 of these like celebrity players, in fact everyone I played against on the whole weekend, was just super nice, really encouraging, really friendly. And afterwards, you know, like, you finish your game with them and you go off and talk to your friends and you do your more rounds and you might bump into the same person again. You're like, oh, how are you doing? And you know, they're interested in how I'm doing. And yeah, it's just such a great and supportive environment. It is mainly cis men. That is just true. To the point where when you go to the toilet in between rounds, there is often a queue for the men's bathroom and no queue for the ladies, which, you know, it's good to not have to queue. But there are a lot more women at these events than I was worried there would be. Because sometimes when you read about other card games like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh, it can be a bit like all men. And there are other like LGBT people. In fact, I might have mentioned this before on this channel, but for a while recently, they had like the North American international champion for Pokemon cards, and then also for Yu-Gi-Oh cards were both trans people at the same time, which was it's pretty cool. But yeah, it's just an overall very supportive and welcoming environment, and I had a really good time just going away and forgetting about the world and not having any bad interactions with people. And yeah, it was just great. And what it has done is given me the energy to face the news again and to, you know, see what is happening with all the American Trump stuff, but also see what's happening in the UK and various other places. So I would just like to strongly recommend that, 1, you try and get this balance between work life and horror. And 2, if you don't have a hobby or you're looking for a new one, or you already like Pokemon, Pokemon cards is a fun hobby, and you can send me messages about it on Blue Sky because I love it. And it's just, you get like pretty pictures of cool little cute monsters, and then you meet nice people, and you just play games all day. It's just fun. I do actually wonder, I feel like trans people are overrepresented in not just Pokemon cards, but all of the card games. I don't really know what that is. I wonder if I'm a stereotype. But there does seem to be more than 1% or 0.5% or even 2% of people are trans. I just seem to bump into more trans people at Pokemon events than anything else. Yeah, anyway. That's my recommendation. It'd be interesting to know what your hobbies are. In fact, what I would love to know in the comments, not just for me and not just for algorithm engagement, though obviously it would help that, so I'm not going to try and pretend otherwise. What are your fun hobbies that are nothing to do with the horror or work? Because there probably are people who are watching who don't really have any hobbies, or maybe don't have friends to go and do these hobbies with, and would like to know if your hobby is the kind of thing where you can turn up and make friends. Like Pokemon cards is perfect for that. Like when I first went, I went on my own, and I went with not very good cards, and it was super welcoming, and yeah, it was great. So if your hobby is also like that, then please let me know and let other people know who are scrolling past. But also maybe if your hobby's like, maybe if you like going on long distance walks in the mountains on your own and you come back feeling refreshed, let us know about that one too, because not everyone likes to go and talk to randoms all the time. I just happen to love doing that. But yeah. Let's hear from everyone. Oh, yeah, of course. In the chat, Paint Warhammer. Yeah, I know. Okay, there's something about Warhammer and trans people. I don't really know why. you all seem to be addicted to painting Warhammer models. That just seems to be a thing. Maybe we'll never understand it. Roller skating. Okay. I haven't been roller skating, rollerblading, or ice skating in a long time, but I do enjoy it. Snowboarding. That sounds like an intense hobby. I've never been skiing or snowboarding. I'm sure it's good. Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. I wonder if and I really don't have a theory as to why trans people, trans men, trans women, and non-binary people seem to be overrepresented in this kind of stuff. Don't know. Maybe we're just better. I have played D&D, but not much. It's fine. I kind of like the rules of card games more than I like the inventiveness of D&D. Needs more rules and less story for my kind of thing. But I don't really like computer games that are RPGs or fantasy novels or anything like that, so I'm a bit of a robot. Yeah, anyway, let's move on to our next topic, which is going to be another jarring change of mood, because I'm possibly going to rant about this one thing. So we are now going to talk about... I haven't really linked these together in a good order, to be honest. I was just like, what things do I want to talk about? And now we're just going through them in this order. We are going to talk about this post, which I just happened to see being linked on Blue Sky. Let me just get it to a good size. I'm going to try this new thing for arranging the screen. If I do this, and then zoom in, no, it drops off the edge. We'll just have that. There you go. That's fine. So this is a post by... Oh, sorry, 1 second. Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is this post. This is just a post on Twitter by a gender critical person from the UK. She's not particularly like a big gender critical person. I just happened to see this when scrolling through Blue Sky, someone responding to this, and I recognized her. And I thought what she was talking about was kind of ironic and interesting, and I want to talk about it. So she's quote tweeting Megan Murphy here. So Megan Murphy, who's quote tweeting Libs of TikTok. So there's a little chain here. Here is Libs of TikTok, who is just a right-wing, anti-feminist, like openly anti-gay marriage, anti-LGBT in full, like a full-on, like today's American Republican fascist type. Horrible person, very clearly anti-trans, but also very clearly anti-abortion, anti-every, the standard mix. And the next layer up, we have Megan Murphy, and she's saying, special shout out to the women, although it seems to be mainly men who oppose LGBT rights, but the women who risked it all to speak about this long before it was cool to do so. Your bravery will not be forgotten by those of us who are in the trenches. And Megan Murphy is an example of one of the earlier people from the gender critical movement. And she was someone who pretended to be a feminist, but seems to have given up on that in the last 4 years or something. But like her thing was she tried to create this like hands across the aisle group in Canada. I think she's Canadian. I'm pretty sure she's Canadian. Yeah. In Canada, which was like right wing and left wing feminists who came together against the trans menace or whatever. And yeah, and she's not that much different to Chea Rychik, who's Lips of TikTok. But importantly, she used to pretend to be very different. She used to pretend to be better. And then we've got here Harvey Jenny. I guess her name is just Jenny, but we'll call her Harvey because that's what she's put here. She is definitely one of the UK brand gender criticals who still does pretend to be like led by feminism against trans people, but is gender critical and just talks about trans people. She says, I was one of those women who was in the trenches risking it all. Who could not see women's rights undermined, our scant resources taken, our feminist movement turned inside out. I risked and lost a lot. I wonder. I feel like when most gender critical people say they risked and lost a lot, what they really mean is a bunch of their like book club friends no longer talk to them because they realize that they're horribly bigoted. But she says, and I've watched as the GC movement, the gender critical movement, morphed into everything the TRAs, that's trans rights activists, that's me, said it was, as women champion rapists and racists, just because they will be clear about who exactly the women are while they set about destroying our freedoms. It's a horrible spectacle, and now I've lost my faith twice. Once when I lost so much for refusing to pretend male people were female, twice when I see what this movement and so many of the women in it have become. I'll leave you to big up the men doing Nazi salutes and banning abortion. Feminism will continue without you. The reason I thought this was like worth talking about is when I first came out, I was under the like very simple view of the world where like there are homophobes and transphobes, they're idiots, they're bad, and their reasoning is I'm homophobic, I'm transphobic, I'm just irrationally prejudiced against trans people, and that's why I oppose your rights. And then when I engaged in arguing about stuff on Twitter, I found the gender critical movement, and they were at least explaining themselves in a way where they were like, oh no, actually we're feminists, we don't just irrationally oppose this, we have all these like rationales and arguments from first principles and all this kind of stuff, and it's at least laid out more like a sort of skeptically or compatible with skeptical position. And so I genuinely, I'm sure that them watching this now will disagree, but that's because they're wrong and they're just going on gut reaction. I genuinely delved into gender critical to see if it was true, because it was new information to me, and I wanted to know. Well, I want to know what's true. Like, I am a skeptic at heart. That is my core position. That is how I came to being an atheist. It's how I came to being pro-gay marriage and pro-gay rights in general. And it's how I came to being pro-trans rights. And finally, it's how I came to come out. But now I do encounter this new thing, which at least to a complete layman approaching it was like, okay, well, this isn't necessarily instantly false in the same way that like Westboro Baptist's position on gay people is instantly and obviously false. And so I was talking to a bunch of the gender criticals in DMs and arguing with them on Twitter. Sometimes they would say things where I didn't really have a response to it because I didn't know yet, but they would say other things that I did, and I'd be like, okay, well, they're wrong on this, but this other thing I need to investigate more. Harvey Jenny, or Gappy Tales, was one of the first people that I encountered from this gender critical movement where I saw like through it and realized that it was what my original view of it, like my original gut reaction on transphobia was. was true. Like, she had written something like, and this isn't a direct quote, don't sue me. She wrote something like, cis women, she obviously didn't say cis, she said, real women have to work so hard to be recognized for any achievement at all, but trans women don't have to. They just get it for free. And or something like that. And it was basically the standard conservative man argument of men have to work really hard, but women get it for free, or white people have to work really hard, but people of color get it for free. Like, it's this DEI higher thing that's going on in America now. It's political correctness gone mad, which was happening when I was like a teenager. It's wokeism gone mad of today. It was just so obviously the same argument, and also it just seemed to be coming from like a place of emotional like frustration. Like how she saw the world was, I mean, I don't know how any of the people like this see the world, like how they can see the world like this when the reality and facts are just completely 180 polar opposite to how they feel about it. But what they feel is that trans people get everything for free, black people get everything for free, women get everything for free. And to be someone claiming to be a feminist and claiming to come to trans rights from this like feminist position, to just be saying the exact same thing that the anti-feminists are saying about women, but just, you know, with the words find and replaced. I was just like, wow, that you're just the same. You like, you might have a little like charade that you play which hides your feelings and your intentions and your real motivations, but it was all just the same. It's just performance. It's not like I believe one thing and then I saw this one post and changed my mind. It was like the first crack. It was the first time when I saw someone from this like pretending to be feminist gender critical movement say something so obviously not what any feminist would ever come out with, because they would have seen this exact pattern 1,000 times. I was just like, well, this is ridiculous. And I remember like messaging some of the other gender critical people I was talking to and like, what the fuck is this? Like, surely you realize what this is. And they were like, she's right. I was like, oh, okay. Right, okay. Interesting. But what the trans people who had been doing it longer than me at the time, this was like 10 years ago, what the trans people who had been on the front lines for longer than I had were saying at the time was, the gender criticals are just another right-wing anti-feminist movement, and they've just tried to wrap it up in the language of feminism to hide what they're doing. And they're gonna, you know, they're promoting the homophobes, they're promoting the sexists, they're making excuses for these people who are otherwise horrible people just because they support trans people. That was already like common knowledge in the trans movement over 10 years ago, decades ago. And I think it's, when I approached it, it's not like I had some kind of arrogance of like, oh, the other trans people are wrong. It was, okay, I've listened to what the trans people are saying. I'm also going to listen to what the gender critical people are saying and try and approach this skeptically, which I did, and which is how I've ended up in my current position. And I do think I genuinely, strongly assert that the only possible position that a skeptic who genuinely analyzes the turf wars can come to is the pro-trans rights position, just in the same way that the only possible skeptical position someone can come to on religion is the atheist position. Yeah, people had already seen through this. This was already common knowledge. Like, she's watched as the gender critical movement has become everything the trans rights activists said it was. I mean, yeah, okay, they're more open about it now, but it already was these things. Like, they were already making excuses for rapists and racists. They were already promoting right-wing people. They, for example, Harvey Jenny were already making very clearly anti-feminist talking points, just copy and pasted and replaced for another thing. It's just... It's ironic that this is what she's complaining about when she's like, for me, the example of this. But also so infuriating because, I mean, obviously from her post saying like, I'm sick of it, I'll leave you to it, she still views herself as some kind of feminist and is frustrated at the mainstream gender critical movement, but is still like clearly, holding gender critical views, is anti-trans. Um, it's so frustrating for them to get to the point where they're like, okay, you know what, trans people, you were right about everything, but you're still wrong. It's like, open your fucking mind, mate. Like, approach this like a skeptic and stop like glugging down propaganda every single day, and realize that maybe if 99.9% of the people on the gender critical team turned out to actually just be conservatives who think libs of TikTok is cool, like Meghan Murphy, and if all the other things we've pointed out are true, maybe some of the arguments we're making, or all of them, are true, and all of the anti-trans arguments that all you guys have been making are all a load of rubbish. So it's, yeah, very frustrating. But I don't think she's capable of changing her mind on this issue, because she's been in this position for a decade, and they've had their little internal complaints about the movement becoming more and more openly fascist for a while, and it doesn't seem to have. I mean, this is like hardly the first sign, is it? I mean, the gender critical movement's been openly supportive of libs of TikTok and the Republicans and Posey Parker and all those wackos for ages. That is the GC movement. That's what it is. And Harvey Jenny is like a tiny little reminder of what it once pretended to be, but nothing else. It's all just superficial. That's what I have to say. She's just one of many gender criticals that I have encountered who just keep saying these things. I mean, she probably still looks at J.K. Rowling as like, well, at least the feminist at the top is still in charge, and J.K. Rowling's fine with all this libs of TikTok bullshit. It's like she's never complaining about it. That's what the movement is. That's the whole movement. And if you're a gender critical person watching this and you're like, well, okay, I agree that the mainstream gender critical movement has lost its way, but we still have some good ideas, or I still believe that trans people shouldn't have rights or something. You believe that because of things you incorrectly and prejudicially, can't remember the word, believe about trans people, and because you've just bought into a load of bullshit right-wing propaganda. The same when you read the newspapers and they're writing all this horrible stuff about immigrants, and you're like, but my colleague, my partner, my friend is an immigrant. This is obviously propaganda. How do people fall for this? You are the kind of person who falls for that exact same propaganda, just about another minority that you don't know anything about. You're identical. And the people who are the racists who are saying that we shouldn't have immigrants in the country because they've never met an immigrant, or they don't realize when they have, they also believe that they have this internally consistent worldview, and when they get pressured on it about something that doesn't quite make sense in it, they too just drop into thought-terminating cliches and turn off and stop rationally analyzing things. When someone says, okay, what is the binary definition of sex? If you just retreat to, oh, well, I'm sure someone knows one, these trans people are science deniers, blah, blah, blah. That is you turning off and not being a skeptic on your position, not really following it through, because you're scared that if you do, you'll come to the realization that we weren't just right about how all the fucking Nazis are gender critical and the gender critical movement seems to have no problem with them. We were also right about all of the core gender critical beliefs. All of them are wrong. Which maybe will lead me on. Maybe I can lead these a little bit better than the original order I had. So, last week, I live reacted to a months-old Graham Linehan video. So, on the theme of reacting to months-old videos of gender-critical men, there was a clip that I saw a while ago of Richard Dawkins saying something like, sex is pretty damn binary, in defense of the gender critical position, which is sex is binary. They're actually different positions, because it's either binary or it's not. And if it's like if someone describes something as pretty binary, what that makes me feel like is, well, 99% of the data fits into one or two boxes, but there's like 1% of it that doesn't. But like, I mean, so it's not a binary, but it looks like one if you zoom out and if you squint, which is a fair comment to describe some data. But to then defend someone who's saying, well, it is binary, would be false. Like, that would be a contradiction of their position. I searched around for 20 minutes just now trying to find the exact clip, and I couldn't find it, but I found a different clip of Richard Dawkins talking to someone, and I thought, let's react to this. I think it's going to be difficult to get a video or get people to... What am I trying to say? I think it would be difficult to clickbait a video to get people to watch about Richard Dawkins, because the issue is most of the content about Richard Dawkins that's ever been produced is going to be about his position on religion as an atheist. And I too am an atheist. And so loads of it is going to be like, Richard Dawkins is a science denier, Richard Dawkins is wrong, from like creationists and people who believe that the dinosaurs went on Noah's Ark and stuff. And it would be easy to just do the same style thumbnail and title, and then to have people come into it with the wrong view. The reason that Richard Dawkins is wrong on trans people is the same reason that he's right about atheism. It's because if you skeptically approach all of the arguments and all of the data and all of the science available, the only real position you can come to is the atheist one, and the only real position you can come to is a trans rights position. He has decided, for whatever reason, that he wants to believe that sex is binary, and he's going to come out with a line like, sex is pretty damn binary, or say things like, oh, you can define sex by gametes or chromosomes, or... Well, it can't be both of them, because if you split people up by chromosomes, you get a different set of categories than if you split people up by what gametes they have. Like, those aren't the same grouping of people. And as soon as you start combining properties, then it's just not a natural set of categories that exist. So he is wrong in a way that I think is very useful to realize, that just because someone has applied critical thinking in one area doesn't mean that they're immune to it in others. That doesn't mean they're immune to irrational thinking in other areas. And why that's important is because that could be true of you too. You could be watching this right now and being like, oh yeah, Katie's right about religion, and Katie's right about trans rights, but she's wrong about, or everyone else is wrong about immigration or mayonnaise on sandwiches or whatever. And you've got to realize when you have prejudices. Everyone has prejudices. I had prejudices, and I probably still have loads of prejudices. I probably believe things that aren't true because I've been taught them, or I've absorbed them from society. And when I find them, when someone points them out to me, my goal is to be someone who's like, okay, this doesn't match with what I believe. This is making me uncomfortable, but I need to just go away and find out if it's true, without just searching for things that confirm what I already believe, which is what most people do. And I've personally been through this loop a few times, as I was mentioning earlier, on religion, on homosexuality, on trans rights, and finally on coming out, which is different to trans rights. And I might well go through it again on maybe even those same topics or on other topics in the future. But Richard Dawkins has obviously gone through it on religion, but then has found trans people, got a gut reaction, decided he's not going to look any further into it, and that's it. Anyway, let's live react to this interview with him. Of course, it mentions J.K. Rowling. This is on Heretics Clips. I think this guy's called Andrew Gold. I don't know. But me and him have talked a bit on Twitter. I think he is deceptive in his position. I think he's very clearly opposed to... I think he's very clearly gender critical, like full-on hardline gender critical, but he likes to try and present himself as just someone who's asking questions in the middle. But you'll see within seconds, you can see through that. And I think it's what's insulting about him is he thinks other people can't see through it. But anyway, let's see what they have to say. Oh, well, let's just see if everyone can hear this first. I think you should be able to hear this.
With regards to, we were talking about, the...
Can we hear the talking? I'll edit this bit out in the clip after. Yeah, that's a good example. I have great taste in music, and I also have a great taste in condiments, but this person here, Kayla, is wrong because they obviously believe that mayonnaise is food, and that is ontologically wrong. Yes, you can hear. Okay, unfortunately, yes. I'm sorry, Lauren. You are going to either have to watch this or leave the stream or mute it and just watch my pretty face. Right, let's have a go. Let's see Richard Dawkins talking to, I think, Andrew.
With regards to, we were talking about, the binary women and men and the idea that you can think that you're a man and be a man or think you're a woman. Did you see that coming at all, like 10, 20 years ago?
Not at all, no.
Like, it is odd.
I think it's lunatic.
What? I don't know. So I seem to remember reading that Richard Dawkins had a trans employee, friend, colleague decades ago. I seem to remember reading a thing written by them saying that they used to work for him or something. There were trans people. I mean, there were trans people before he's even born, but like, it was in the news. It was in popular culture. It was in popular culture when I was a kid, like he's saying 20 years ago or whatever. But it was like frontline news when Richard Dawkins was a kid. Actually, let's find out when he was a kid. How old even is he? How old Richard Dawkins? He was born in the 40s. Wow, okay. He's 83 years old. So when was Corbett? No, oh god, that's depressing. Okay, so Corbett versus Corbett is one of the cases that ended up leading to the Gender Recognition Act in the UK, and that happened in 1970 when Richard Dawkins was 30. And that was like mainstream news at the time. The reason why I just said it was depressing is because when I searched for it, the top link is by Sex Matters, which they're just on the propaganda. Anyway, I don't know why they're all pretending that trans people are new. Like he's met trans people. He's seen us in the news. He's seen us on TV. Like, what are you talking about?
Lunatic, actually. I mean, it's verging on insanity. So
It's just such a weak comment to just be like, trans people, it's insanity. So that means I don't even have to rationally address a single thing they say or any of the evidence. I'm just going to say, it's crazy. How can a man become a woman? Crazy, crazy. No, I'm not listening. Fingers in ears, blah, 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 blah.
I did not see that coming. I mean, I could have imagined...
I can't imagine that he was ignoring LGBT rights struggles. Like, that's believable.
Imagine writing a satirical novel about it. But that's about it.
Cringe.
Yeah, I remember Ricky Gervais makes a joke about that when he says, I think it was just that. It was like the one thing nobody said 10 years ago. That would be the worst thing you can say on Twitter is women don't have penises. Now that's...
On Twitter. How long ago? Elon Musk has owned Twitter for more than 6 months. This is from 6 months ago. I mean, I feel like the best thing you can say on Twitter is women don't have penises. That is how you get the most amount of likes and attention. It's like the ultimate signaling and way of getting likes and clicks and stuff. The idea Ricky Gervais makes a joke about it. Ricky Gervais only makes jokes only makes snide, ignorant comments about trans people. That's like his whole personality now, isn't it?
That would get you. You know,
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can think to top that is identify as a dog. I mean,
It's the one joke. I'm going to speed this up. He said the one joke. How funny, hilarious. I don't know. Like, he's laughing. I don't know how. How are they? Can you? I mean, obviously, Richard Dawkins is a big celebrity, so maybe this guy is like hype that Richard Dawkins has come on his show, and so he's got a laugh at the comments. And Richard Dawkins is old, so he's like going senile maybe, and so he's said this thinking it's new and funny. But you still see conservatives still saying I identify as a dog and laughing like it's funny, even now in 2025, when like I identify as a attack helicopter is from like the Obama election run up, and it how is it funny to you? Like, maybe if you were born yesterday and you have no idea what a trans person is, and you're like, someone who, you know, used to be a man and now they say they're a woman, and you're like, right, okay. And you're like, what if I said I was a helicopter? Ha ha ha. And you're like, unable to rationally, like, consider why that might be different. Then maybe it'll be funny. Like, if you're 14, maybe it's funny. I just don't know how they're still laughing at it, or why they still think it's like a dunk. Like, why do you think I identify as a dog is a response? It's like when someone says, oh, actually, I'm gay and I'm only attracted to people of the same sex. So, I identify as homosexual or whatever. Why don't you say it at the same time? Is it because you have an understanding that people don't all have the same sexuality, but that it is a core component of who people are, and when they're telling you what their sexuality is, they're not making some like statement of supernatural fact where you must believe it in all cases and people cannot lie about it, and it 100% describes them with no wiggle room or anything. Or are you just like, oh, this is someone who is trying to describe themselves to me, and they know best about the best way to describe themselves. Like what? Yeah, it's just embarrassing that they think that it's most embarrassing that they still laugh every time. Like if they're trying to make this as an argument, and they're just ignoring all the responses to it, that's one thing. But the fact they have to do a little laugh every time is just so cringe. My goodness.
I can imagine now there'll be so many angry comments even now just from this, and I don't know. It's a weird thing. I want to respect everybody. And
Raging. I mean, maybe angry that you're still saying the same one joke after 400 years, rather than angry at being offended by it.
Understand everybody, but it just really is something that. Okay, so is there any? If you have to really stretch your mind, is there any scientific backing for the concept of somebody's like there's a woman brain and a man brain, and
there might be that.
Oh, hang on.
So there might be that, but to go from that to saying because you have a female outlook.
Okay. So I think Andrew, well, he's obviously just trying to do the classic stupid or dishonest thing to try and describe the claims about sexual dimorphism in brain structure as there's a woman brain and a man brain is either stupid or dishonest or just wrong. There are I mean, it is true that there is some level of sexual dimorphism between men and women's brains in general. But the claim that therefore men are less emotional or women should do the dishes, or that's the kind of garbage that feminists have been fighting against for decades. Saying there's a woman brain and a man brain to justify women not being allowed to study maths at university, or to say that men are more rational or more capable of complex tasks and all that kind of stuff. Because that's all stuff that people have said based on this claim. There's a woman brain and a man brain. But I mean, sexual dimorphism covers a huge range of things, and even covers things like volume. volume between men and women, just of their whole body, is something that's sexually dimorphic. Men are generally have a higher volume than women, as in they're bigger, they're heavier. And that doesn't mean it's true for every single individual. That's not what sexual dimorphism means. It just means there's a range and there's like 2 modes. It's like bimodal. When sexual dimorphism in humans is bimodal. There is actually lizards where it's more than 2. There's like a type of lizard where there's like 5 different morphs. There's like 2 female ones and 3 male ones, which is really cool. So sexual dimorphism isn't always bimodal. It can be polymodal. But brains definitely are something that has some kind of sexual dimorphism. And we don't know much about brains, so it's not like we can zoom in and be like, oh yeah, here's the bit that makes you good at reading maps, and women don't have it and men do have it, therefore, blah, blah, blah. That's actually the gender critical way of looking at the world, where everything is just a binary. And they are in a position where they either have to say there's no sexual dimorphisms in brain at all, or they say there is some, and then when there is, it's binary, because everything's binary for gender criticals. And so then you end up in situations where men do one thing and women do the other thing, which is garbage. I am pleasantly surprised that Richard Dawkins is like, yeah, there may be sexual dimorphism in brains. I'm kind of surprised he doesn't know, because he is a biologist, but if that's not his area of expertise, then good on him for not just wildly proclaiming it. Anyway, let's just let's see what he was going to say next.
And
there might be that. There might be that. But to go from that to saying because you have a female outlook on life or something, therefore you are a woman. I mean, that is just debauching language.
Oh yeah, that thing that we always say. Every trans person's always saying, "Oh, because I have a female outlook on life, I am a woman." Like, it's just such an embarrassing straw man. Like, come on. What it just says to me is that he's going out of his way to not ever hear a trans person say anything. I absolutely do not think I have a female outlook on life, therefore I'm a woman. That is not something I've ever said or implied. I've literally never encountered anyone saying or even implying that at all who is trans or supportive of trans people, or like, where the fuck does this come from? It comes from their little gender critical hate mills where they all just exaggerate things in a big circle and all believe each other because they're stupid. What are you talking about? Like, even if we try and steelman his position, where maybe he's actually trying to say, because I feel like a woman, I am therefore a woman. That isn't even the claim that trans people are making in general. I mean, sure, that is a claim that some people have made, but that's not the argument we're making to justify trans women having women's rights, for example. It's just, oh man. What is so infuriating is, like, Richard Dawkins has more power than any, like, political soft power or anything, connections, than any trans person in the entire country. And he's going on, like, not just YouTube shows like this, but like the TV and the radio and mainstream stuff, and presenting these arguments in just the most ridiculous straw man ways, and just isn't questioned on it. Like, obviously this guy isn't in any sense a neutral journalist, but even the ones who pretend to be, they're not questioning. Like, why didn't say, okay, who said that? Where, you know, what organization, what mainstream trans rights activist is making this claim? Because this is why I say he's not applying the skeptical position universally, because this is what creationists and stuff do about atheists all the time. Like, they just don't listen to what they have to say at all. They completely skip past their arguments, and then they make their own little version of it and say something else out that no one's actually claimed. It's just so embarrassing. Like, and it's so frustrating.
It's one thing. It's perfectly legitimate to say I'm a man, but I feel a certain feminine attitude to things. I think like a woman. That's fine. I mean, that doesn't worry me at all. But to then say,
well, I don't know. I think that worries me. What I think like a woman. Like, what does that mean? It's kind of garbage. And this is the case where, like, Richard Dawkins is obviously celebrated by the gender critical movement. But that's not like a feminist position. I think like a woman, is it? Like, what the fuck does that mean? That sounds bullshit. That is the thing that when people say man brain and woman brain, that's the thing we're fighting against. Like, there's no think like a woman or think like a man. People think differently. There might be like bimodal distributions in behavior between men and women. There's certainly sexually dimorphic behavior in basically every other animal, but we don't know what extent to that is learned or innate, and we don't know what extent to that is social and not social. But even then, it's like completely ridiculous to say, oh, they think like a woman, they think like a man. That's the kind of sexist rubbish that the feminist movement is opposed to.
Therefore, I am a woman is just a betrayal of language, of truth and the virtues of honest communication.
I find the ideology very conservative because it tells me that if my
what? Yeah, okay, it's very conservative. That's why the conservative movement in the UK and globally is so pro-trans rights. Good point, mate.
son wants to play with things that are typically feminine or stereotypically feminine, then they have to change to fit in. They have to become a woman to fit in.
No one's fucking saying this. What are you talking about? Okay, now he has got angry comments in response to this video. Like, what is this bullshit? They all just fucking say it to each other all the time. Trans people think if you like Barbies, then you have to cut off your penis. Like, what are you talking about? I've literally never encountered anyone in my life who has said this. It's just totally made up. You are lying. You have made this up.
Yes, I quite agree.
It's a crazy thing, really. So, okay.
Yeah, it would be crazy if anyone was fucking saying it. Find some... Tell you what, challenge for gender critical people watching this. Find me a trans person who's not like a 3-follower account on Reddit or whatever. Find me like a relevant organization or activist or public like persona, personality, or whatever the word is, a public person who has said, you like feminine things as a child, therefore you are a girl. Find me someone and I'll fucking shoot them down on my next show. Because they're wrong, because it's a completely nonsense position and it's not a position that I believe about myself or anyone I've ever met has believed about themselves or anyone else around them. It's just ridiculous. You're arguing against a straw man because you can't argue against real arguments.
So if we are just to go out there a bit, I mean, are there aspects of brains that are male and typically female?
Probably. I don't know much about it. I wouldn't wish to deny that. But it's not a very profound...
Like, cringe framing of the question, but I actually think Richard Dawkins is handling of this little section well.
Observation. I think that you can find aspects of feminine sympathy in some male people and vice versa, and it would be surprising if that were not so.
I take that back. So, here's my position. In a lot of animals, ranging from beetles to baboons, there is some level of sexually dimorphic behaviors. There is, for example, a beetle where the females, at some point of the year, fly to the top of trees, and the males, I don't know if they can fly, but they go to the bottom of trees and slowly climb up the trees. And when they encounter another beetle, they chuck them off. And so the strongest, best climbers, best chuckers get to the top. And then they get to have sex with the females that they find. And the higher up they go will be the better females who can fly higher, whatever. No one's taught the beetles this behavior. And generally it's the men doing the climbing and it's the women doing the flying to the top. Another example is, in fact, here is a really good example. There is a type of crab, I can't remember which crab it is, and it might be multiple types of crab, where, or in fact, all crabs lay their eggs in their like tail bit that's like folded round. You don't really think of crabs as having a tail, but if you flip them over, you can see they've got like a tail that's kind of, imagine if you got like a prawn and you kind of folded the tail right up. That's kind of what crabs have going on. And they lay their eggs inside, And when the eggs are ready to become the next stage of the crab life cycle, they have multiple life cycles and they become plankton first. When they're ready to do that, the female crab climbs up to the top of a coral or a rock or whatever and does this little dance at the top where she uses her claws and opens her tail up and just kind of wafts the plankton stage crab babies out into the sea. And that's in order to spread the baby crabs. I wish I could remember the word for baby crabs. Embarrassingly, I can't. To like spread them further out. They can go further and find safer places and stuff. But when they're doing the little dance on top of this rock, they're in a dangerous position because the longer they're up there, the more predators will be able to see them. And quite often they would get eaten in that stage. But they have so many, like some crabs lay billions of eggs, that just the odds are some of their offspring will survive. Male crabs do not do that. Only the female ones climb up and do the little dance. And that, again, is a behavior that is built into them in some way. They're not learning that. Crabs don't really have a society. Certainly the beetles don't have a society. And there's some level of sexually dimorphic behavior there. However, the crabs can get infected by a parasitic barnacle, which actually goes into their brain, rewires a part of their brain, and will convince them that they are a pregnant female crab. And if they're a female crab, they will go to the top and start doing the dance. But the barnacle, as well as going into their brain, eats their genitals. This is grim, by the way. Eats their genitals and replaces them with barnacle genitals and lays its eggs there. And then the crab does a little dance and spreads the barnacle parasite everywhere. Pretty grim. But if it infects a male crab, it will convince it that it's a female crab, and it will climb up and it will do the female dance that only the female crabs do. So there's something in there. There's some kind of programming going on in the crab's brain where they act different for the males and the females, and there's some way in which it can go wrong in quotes, because it's going right for the barnacle. It's just not what the crab wants, probably. And that's true for like basically every animal, and it's true also in social animals like other primates, meerkats, and all this kind of stuff. There's very clear roles often for male and female animals, and sometimes they don't fit into them and they don't do what you would think. Surprise, strange. How weird that other animals have the same thing that humans do. But generally, bimodally, they fit into these distributions. So it would be surprising if humans were the only ones where that wasn't true. Basically, that's what I'm arguing.
But as I said, but to go from that to the positive statement, "I am a woman," is verging on insanity.
Is it?
But it's not actually verging on insanity, is it? Because if someone said, like, this is a classic gender critical straw man as well. They will say, you believe you can change sex and you can't change sex, so therefore you are insane. In the same way that you might say you think you can fly and you can't fly, so you're insane. When we're saying that we've changed sex, we aren't saying, oh, we have changed chromosomes. I've gone in and changed my chromosomes in my cells. I'm not saying, oh, I now have ovaries which can produce ova. That's not the claim that I'm making, because I don't think, and the reality is that sex isn't defined just by your chromosomes or just by your ability to produce gametes. Again, if you define it by chromosomes, that is different. That comes up with different results than if you define it by gametes. And neither of those are binary. But even if you pretend they are, the claim isn't that. The claim is that sex is made from a huge number of things, genotype and phenotype, which means both inside your cells and the mechanisms that have for reproducing your cells, all the way up to macro structures in humans. For example, whether you have breasts or not. That is something that is part of sex. That is a sexually dimorphic aspect of humans. Whether you have a uterus or not, whether you have testicles or not. These are all things which are themselves not binary. For example, the classic, is this baby a boy or a girl, is to look and see if they have a penis or a vagina. Like the classic 3-year-old explanation of the world. But that isn't a binary. There is actually a range of genital configurations where it's not clear which one of those two things it's closer to. And you can Google that on your own time. There are pictures on the internet. But also then that itself, which genitals someone has, doesn't always match up with their other sex characteristics. It doesn't always match up with chromosomes. It doesn't always match up with gametes. And all of the other aspects, like when you come to puberty, there's another load of sexual dimorphic stuff which kicks in then. And you can change all of the ones that actually affect your interactions and day-to-day life to some degree, and it's much easier to change them when you're younger. Why would anyone want to change their chromosomes? Who gives a shit about chromosomes? You can't see them. They don't affect your life. You don't interact with them. So it's like changed all the things that matter. And it changed enough things that the people around us who interact with me every day, not people who know me, well, people who know me and people who don't know me, will interact with me like they interact with other women. So they've noticed that I've changed sex, and you're just trying to argue that my chromosomes haven't changed, so therefore I shouldn't have rights to deal with the situations that I just factually face. That's a nonsense position. That is an insane claim. The insane claim is that my chromosomes are more important for determining which rights and protections I get than the reality of my life, my actual material body, and the material interactions I have with the world. That is a way more insane claim than, what he's saying or what he's strawmanning onto us.
Dangerous?
Well, I think that
Wait.
verging on insanity.
Is it dangerous?
Well, I think that
You look so serious. Sorry.
People certain people like Kathleen Stock and J.K. Rowling have suffered in their lives and their careers as a consequence of speaking.
It must be so hard to be a internationally celebrated billionaire who's never faced hardship since becoming a billionaire. It must be so difficult. J.K. Rowling has suffered so much. I mean, who gives a shit about these trans people who are getting fired for who they are and beaten up and kicked out on the street as teenagers and, removed their human rights and access to healthcare removed? They've got nothing. But Kathleen Stock, she resigned from her job, but the media made it sound like she was kicked out, and the suffering. And now all she is a right-wing person who constantly gets speaking engagements and front page headlines and money for saying things that are just trivially false. It must be so difficult. So the suffering.
Speaking out on behalf of women, and they so far haven't, I think, actually suffered physical danger, but some of them have come close to it.
The saddest part
No, they haven't. As a group, trans people suffer physical danger across the world every single day. I've been in a position multiple times where I've been risking physical danger. I've been sexually assaulted, which isn't, I mean, I guess you could describe it as physical danger or not. But I've been sexually assaulted multiple times, and have been in a position where I, with a friend, had to basically run for our lives. No, Poppy, sorry, Poppy's trying to drink my drink. Poppy, you've got a drink. She always wants to drink out of my drink rather than her one. So I've got her own cup on the side and she's still trying to drink out of it. Look at this cat. There you go. Come on. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, it's just they're just looking at someone who's got on the sufferingometer, they've got a 1 out of 100,000, and they're ignoring the people that they're causing a load of suffering to, whose suffering ranges from hundreds of times the orders of magnitude up to the point where they're losing their lives over it. Just ridiculous. They just do not consider trans people as full humans, full members of society. A trans person's suffering is just absolutely meaningless to them, to the point where a gender critical person stubbing their toe is more meaningful than a trans person being stabbed to death.
about J.K. Rowling is that she was abused by her first husband and left in the street in a pool of her own blood in Portugal.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, before she wrote Harry Potter, and she had a very different.
Which is very grim, and it is horrific that happened to J.K. Rowling, and it's horrific that's happened to anyone. But obviously completely unrelated to trans people and completely unrelated to her position on trans rights. Not relevant at all. And also, when she was in that position, she wasn't then blamed for deception or anything, which we'll come on to later, and she wasn't refused access to shelters or anything just because she was born different. So
difficult time during that time. So for her, it's a really personal thing,
Yes.
about women's spaces and changing them.
it's not personal. It's not about changing rooms. Like, what are you fucking talking about? If you're like, I've been in an abusive relationship before, and it's horrific. And I was fortunately never in a position where I was in a pool of my own blood. Like, that is so grim, and I am genuinely horrified to hear that anyone's had to face that, and I know multiple people do. But do you know who does have to face that as well as J.K. Rowling? Like, trans women too. And it doesn't make it personal for you if you have, a horrific past with an abuser. That's nothing to do with you wanting to try and take away trans people's passports or banning us from the toilet at work. Like, utterly disgusting to try and link those two things. Like, what are you fucking talking about?
Yes, and things like
I did not know that.
It's so sad. It's so sad to think that. And then the Harry Potter stuff. I mean, it's an analogy for the Nazis. I don't know. Have you read Harry Potter?
It is. Like, it's funny how, like, her Death Eater or whatever they're called, like the whole thing about purebloods and how you can't change from your birth. I mean, like, pretty much describes the gender critical position. Like, it is like the perfect analogy for gender criticalism. And she's like her creation, I think it's Death Eaters, are like the perfect analogy in the world for the gender critical movement.
I have, yes.
Enjoy it?
I didn't. Well, yes, I enjoyed it. I held out against it for a while, but then I discovered that Stephen Fry was reading it, and I can't resist Stephen Fry, so I listened to him, and I liked it. I mean, quite a lot of what I like is that she's actually sending up the magical stuff. I mean, it's kind of satirical. I didn't know it had anything to do with the Nazis. That's
as it goes further into the whole mythology, I think there's like the good and the bad and the purebloods.
Okay, I was carrying on. I've only read the first 2 or 3 books, I think.
It's funny because it's so. So I'm going to show off now, right? So I can speak 5 languages, and each time
I don't know if they're still talking about trans people or not. Let's
learned a new one. I did it through Harry Potter in Spanish or French. So there's the 7 or I think it's 7 books. I'm not sure. And what's brilliant about it as a language tool is they start very much for children. They're like for a reading age. Want everyone to have the pure blood. Like.
Okay, yes, that sounds very interesting.
It's like they want everyone to be defined by how they were born, and it doesn't matter what you achieve in your life or what your material circumstances are. You're either good or bad. That's like the Nazi analog, and also in real life the Nazis hold the same position on trans people as the gender critical movement and J.K. Rowling. So yeah, oh well, let's not investigate that any further. Let's just carry on talking.
I shall resume.
Yes,
my Stephen Fry listening.
He's great, Stephen Fry. Yes. I heard him talk a little bit about doing those audiobooks, and there were certain words he was tripping over.
Yes, I heard that.
He asked J.K. Rowling, "Can I do different words?" And she said no.
Yes,
which fair enough. You're a writer.
Yes.
Gosh, Stephen Fry. Have you done debates with him? I'm just remembering now because I know he did Intelligence Squared. Was that with you or was Christopher Hitchens?
Yes, it was Christopher Hitchens.
What's really going on?
Possibly. Yes, could be.
What does the poetry of reality mean? That's your...
unlike any of our ancestors up to a century or so ago, 2 centuries maybe, really hadn't a clue why we existed and where we come from is what I mean by it. So partly that, but also, apart from being true...
I'm just scrolling ahead to see if there's any more trans stuff.
The alternative, the idea of it being holes in the sky, it's just so petty. It's just you go on about any religion. Incredibly boring.
Well, I definitely am. But my religion is sort of a thing probably at the back of my head out for that.
Wishful thinking.
Or that they'll discover some off of your life.
Yeah.
It sounds like not. Thus is the conclusion of this section. I wasn't in a position when Richard Dawkins came out as gender critical to be surprised or disappointed by it. But I think a lot of people were. And the reason I wasn't is because he's come out with a bunch of anti-feminist stuff before. And I already thought that he was rubbish. The fact that it's so clear now that he just has a non-skeptical position on trans rights, like, it's so blatant to me, I guess, because I understand about trans rights the most. When he'll, like, it's the same with like a few other like people in his position. Like, I know Robert Winston's another like famous TV biologist or doctor or whatever he is, where they'll go on and say things like sex is pretty damn binary, or sex is defined by your chromosomes and your gametes and your gonads and your hormones and they're just kind of like approach this thing where they approach the idea that, oh, it's pretty binary. Don't ask any more questions. I'm not going to take any more questions. It's binary. End of conversation. It's like, well, what the hell do you mean by pretty binary? So what you actually mean is sex isn't binary. And what you actually mean is you can't just define sex just by chromosomes. You can't just define it by gametes. You can't just define it by gonads. And there's actually a combination of multiple sex characteristics. And when you factor them all in, and you can actually change the majority of them, and you can certainly change all the ones which affect how you move through society, suddenly the idea of saying you've changed sex isn't insanity. And it would actually be insane to claim that you believe that there's a binary, but you can't give a single binary definition. Ridiculous. Clown world. Gender critical beliefs. So the next thing we're going to talk about is really fucking grim. So I'm going to give a warning for anyone who doesn't want to hear about attempted murder of a trans person just for existing, basically. And you are totally welcome to check out. I will edit this into a separate section afterwards. We'll probably be on this for 15 minutes. See you in 15 minutes if you don't want to talk about this. That is totally fine. But we're going to talk about an incident that recently happened in the UK. So a 18-year-old trans woman, had sex with someone, and then afterwards, they found out that she was trans, or did they claim they didn't know at the time, and decided to try and stab her to death, screaming transphobic slurs at her. Also, when they did have sex, this guy and this trans woman, without her consent, he filmed it and posted it on the internet, which is a crime. That's 2 crimes. Filming people having sex without their consent, and also revenge porn, basically. Both horrific violations of someone's sexual boundaries, and should have him on the sex offenders register. But then tried to kill her for being trans. And then, of course, because we live in fucking 2025 and the British media is the worst institution on earth, well, maybe not, but they're pretty fucking bad. They're trying to blame the trans girl, and so the gender critical movement. They're trying to blame her for what happened and make her into the villain. So here we have an incredibly horrific Daily Mail article. The title is kind of garbage. Teen knifed at roller disco after row about her gender. And that's not, that's a horrific simplification, but it is a Daily Mail headline, so it's going to be terrible anyway. But then it says, mob targeted girl 18 over her trans identity. Lie? Fuck off. It's not over her lie. It's not lying to be a trans person and to exist, and then later on you find out that they're trans. Maybe she assumed that he already knew. Maybe he did already know, and when he was confronted on the fact that he had had sex with a trans person and shamed by his transphobic friends, he was embarrassed and decided to lie about it. We don't know. That happens all the fucking time, by the way. That is not a rare, maybe of this crazy scenario that I've imagined up. That happens all the time, where cis people have sexual relations with a trans person and then pretend they didn't know, or they didn't do it, or they want to keep it secret. Like, if you're a trans person on the internet, you have got messages from some creepy, sleazy guy being like, you can be my little secret. All the time. That's the most likely scenario here. But also, if she just had sex with him, did he ask if she was trans? Did he say, before we have sex, I am someone who is irrationally prejudiced against trans people, and thus, if you are trans, I do not want to have sex? Of course he didn't. He saw someone who he was attracted to, and he had sex with them, and then afterwards, he learned that it wasn't socially acceptable in his bigoted group of friends, and then they decided it was so socially unacceptable that the only response was murder. Like, that is how utterly horrific the reverse framing on this, even just this subtitle is. She was stabbed 9 times for lying about her gender identity before. It's not a lie to not say something. If someone asked you to your face, Like, are you Irish? Are you like born in March or whatever? You know, if you have some irrational prejudice, I don't sleep with people who are Capricorns. Like, okay, well, that's fine, but someone is not lying. If you have sex with someone without asking them if they're a Capricorn, and then it turns out they are, and you try and stab them to death, that isn't them lying. That isn't a lie. And this is the framing that the gender critical movement are constantly trying to push, that just by existing, you are deceiving people. Like, just by walking down the street, if someone sees you and is attracted to you, you've lied to them. That's how they're trying to frame this. It's just so utterly horrific. Like, the most vile people on earth trying to claim that someone who filmed someone having sex against without their consent and then trying to murder them is somehow the victim. It's just so grim. This picture of this girl here, for some reason, I don't know why all the newspapers chose this photo. She's one of the attackers. She isn't the trans woman victim. But yeah, so she's kicked the trans woman. I don't know. We don't need to go into all of the details of how horrific the thing are. But they were even laughing about they filmed the attack. They filmed the stabbing with laughing emojis, telling friends, "I'm going to jail, bro. I stabbed her." Screaming slurs at her at the same time when it was happening. So the trans woman says, "The incident has resulted in thick scars. I have experienced animosity towards me being transgender, but I never thought anyone would have so much hatred for me. Other than Rebecca Camber, who writes these articles. Whether she wrote this bit, I don't know. I know they often say journalists don't write their headlines. But man, if I wrote an article about someone trying to murder a trans person because they had sex with them, and then my editor wrote this headline, I'd quit instantly because that is so disgusting. Vile people. I don't. No one with morals works for the Daily Mail. They just can't, can they? Yeah, grim. I did try looking up to see if she had social media, but she doesn't, or she hasn't used it in a long time. Very depressing situation, and I'm glad that I managed to vent out some of my rage about it. But now you've now learned about this, and maybe you need to vent your rage out about it. Yeah, I don't know. Send the Daily Mail an email, tell them to fuck off or something. Not a threat. But they should fuck off. And I'm glad they're going to prison for it, because fuck them. Like, get wrecked, dickheads. And I'm glad she survived. But the gender critical movement doesn't care at all. They probably wish she had died, and they think that the real victim here is the sex criminal murderer rather than the victim. The actual real victim. So, let's next talk about the next thing we're going to talk about is this. And we're going to try and make it so it all fits on the screen. Trans athletes' rights was opposed by those who viewed female athletes as undeserving. Study finds. Now, this is one of those studies where you're like, yeah, we already knew that. But it's still good to get like a study in writing. Oh, okay. Hang on. Maybe it looks like we need to deal with some chat before we move on to this thing. So we've got some people talking in chat. Which gender critical people are we talking about who are saying that the trans girl was the real or the victim was the guy who got who did the stabbing? There's a whole Mumsnet thread on it. Loads of people saying it. I mean, that's the vibe in the. It's what the. I mean, it's literally what the subheadline says in the Daily Mail article. It's a standard gender critical position. Like, it's the normal. It is the baseline, normal, average, moderate gender critical position to believe that if I was to go out clubbing and to be on the dance floor and then some guy come up to me and us kiss, the average normal position is that they think that I should be then able to be prosecuted for sexual assault. Which is a completely insane, unjustifiable, evil position. Because what do they want? They want you to wear an armband all the time that says whether you're trans or not in case they're attracted to you. Like, completely garbage, enforceable position. But it is a position that they managed to force into law in lots of countries. I mean, currently that isn't the law in the UK, but the latest guidance written by gender critical people in the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK basically says the same thing. I mean, that's the normal gender critical position. They believe that it's like sex by or kissing by deception or whatever. If you don't actively tell everyone your entire medical history every single time you do anything. Disgusting position. It's the normal gender critical position. Anyone saying, I've never seen a gender critical person say that, is just lying. Find me a gender critical person who doesn't think that it would be sex by deception if I went and kissed someone at a club. Which, by the way, every single fucking trans person in the entire world has done. They have found someone they're attracted to and kissed them. Without first listing off, like, oh, actually, just so you know, I've had an orchiectomy and a vaginoplasty, and it's like, stupid position. There wasn't a murder. The trans girl here wasn't murdered. It was attempted murder. They tried to kill her. They stabbed her. You don't stab people without trying to kill them. Yeah, exactly. But they can always tell. This is a good example of someone like Richard Dawkins not being skeptical. Because the gender critical movement, the majority, if not all gender critical people, believe two undeniably internally contradictory positions at the same time. They believe you can always tell who is trans. That is an important belief for the gender critical movement, because if you can't always tell who is trans, then that means there are some trans women who experience misogyny, and that means taking away their protections from misogyny is just exposing them to misogyny and is very transparently wrong. So they cannot agree that some trans people pass. So they have to say that they can always tell. That's a core important part. But simultaneously, they will say that a trans person who goes out and has someone who's attracted to them and comes up and kisses them, and that person doesn't know they're trans, how would you even know whether they know or not? I just assume everyone knows because I'm so loud about it all the time. Maybe some people don't know. I don't know. Well, and actually, I do know some people don't know because they say things about it. But yeah, they will then argue that we need a law saying that trans people who go out and kiss someone at a club should be arrested, and they can't both be true. That they're mutually exclusive positions, but they're both core gender critical positions, and you will not find a single mainstream gender critical person arguing against even one of those, let alone both of them. So yeah, it's completely bullshit. And if Richard Dawkins or any other person who's walked into the gender critical movement a bit later on, even spent 5 minutes being skeptical about it and confronting the beliefs that the gender critical movement has, they would be like, hang on a minute, these two core tenets are mutually exclusive. Anyway, right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to our next segment before I spend the whole time telling chat to fuck off. Most people in chat are great. I know for a fact that LGB Alliance believes that sex by deception is a thing that innocent girl has committed. Like, that's a position that LGB Alliance holds for certain. But they don't care about the stabbing at all. They don't care if she was stabbed or not. If she died, they wouldn't care. If she died, they would spend 99.9% of the time talking about how sex by deception is evil and should be outlawed. And then they'll be like, oh, and it's unfortunate she died. Oh, well. Yeah. Anyway, we're moving on. We're moving on to the next bit. We're going to start with this bit again so I can clip it neatly. So we're going to look at this article. Transgender athletes' rights was opposed by those who viewed female athletes as undeserving. Study finds. I feel like that's grammatically incorrect. But anyway, new research published in Sociology of Sport suggests that the rhetoric of Save Women's Sports movement may reflect ideological motivations rather than a genuine commitment to advancing opportunities for female athletes. Wow, do you think? Who would have thought? My goodness, what a groundbreaking study. It's almost as if every single person saying they're defending women is actually a misogynist dickhead and the part of the same anti-feminist movement that opposed women's rights and gay rights. Wow, who would have thought? Goodness. Anyway, using data collected between 2018 and 19, researchers found that opposition to transgender athletes' rights are associated with beliefs about women's physical appearance, negative attitudes towards female athletes, and homophobic views. Wow, what a shocker. This is a classic example of study confirms the sun rises in the morning. Like, okay, we've known this since the dawn of time. It's been very clearly obvious to everyone who is rational that that is the case. There are no good rational arguments against trans people in sports on a general scale. Like banning 14-year-olds from doing PE, there's no rational argument for that at all. Going to extreme lengths to change the constitution of a state to ban one girl from playing tennis doesn't make any sense. Banning trans women from playing pool or snooker or darts, totally insane. And we've all seen that the people who are making the most noise about this hate women and have been talking about how women's sports are rubbish for years, and now all of a sudden the new thing is that they pretend that they like women's sports. But it is good still to have it as a study in a real journal. Sometimes you need to do science, the formal process of science, so that you can then build on it in the future, and so that politicians can't deny it so easily. That they still will. Understanding the factors that shape public opinions can push leaders to make changes or create policies that are responsive to people's beliefs and how they come to them. Altogether, studying public opinions about trans people, trans athletes' rights allows for improved understandings of the extent to which the reasons why members of the public criticize or advocate for trans people in sports and society want to see changes in sport and society policies and interactions, and are recognizing meanings and values associated with sex and gender and sexuality in sports and society, which is very true. I do feel like there's a big chunk of like liberals or centre-left people who don't know or care about trans rights, and they would probably be offended on your behalf if some guy walked in to a pub or something in front of them and started misgendering you and calling you slurs and stuff. They'd probably stand up for you in that situation. But they still think you should be banned from toilets and banned from from doing sport at school or something. Because that's their gut feeling, and they don't really they haven't analysed this at all. And some of those people are making the policies in the Democrat Party and in the Labour Party in the UK. And they're like, oh yeah, we should just give up on trans rights. Well, the Republicans want this a lot and we don't really care, so we'll just let them take that because we don't stand up for it. And I'm sure everyone will support us. And they don't realise, because they just buy into this media bullshit where they're like, we're defending women, and they're like, okay, we don't want to be seen attacking women here, so we'll just keep our hands off. But when they see studies like this, hopefully they can be convinced to the reality of it, which is all the people saying this are just anti-women, right-wing conservative dickhead types, and they should say, yes, let's make women's sports better by actually funding them and looking at the actual data. And, oh, what's that? Trans women statistically underperform at every single sport at every single level. Banning trans girls from doing PE at school doesn't benefit anyone. Okay, let's put that in policy. And at the same time, we can fund women's sports. So yeah, hopefully something good will come from this study. We'll see. So, I'm going to have a drink of water. Yeah, at least once. So someone in the comments saying, at least one Democratic senator has publicly blamed LGBT for Dems' loss, and that they should capitulate, I think you mean, to the Nazis. Yeah, there's just fucking always someone. There's always people in left-wing movements who try and drag everything right. And I mean, I guess it's a coalition of people with different views, but it just seems that these people always want to drag it right and right and right and right and right with no limit. They don't seem to actually have a limit. I don't know why they're in whatever movement. But there's always going to be someone who says we need to throw LGBT people under the bus. It's probably always going to be a straight man, to be honest. We'll see. So we are next going to talk about... Oh, this next thing is relevant. So the last thing. I mean, it's all relevant. It's all trans rights stuff. This is ridiculous, in fact. Let's talk about this next. So, the next thing we're going to talk about is... So, in Northern Ireland... wait, that is what we're talking about. Yes. In Northern Ireland, they have followed Wes Streeting's ban on puberty blockers. Oh, man. I need to sort this out. The Northern Irish government, which is part of the UK government, if you don't know how the structure works, the UK is England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And each of them have their own little governments. England has like a government which kind of rules over everything. And then Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland have their own governments. And the Northern Irish government also chose to ban puberty blockers in Northern Ireland. And so people pressured them and said, cool, where's your evidence to justify that? And they said, we haven't got any. It's not in the public interest. So here we have executive say, is this a grammar thing as well? Isn't it a bit executives? Say releasing evidence supporting puberty blocker ban is not in the public interest. Why would it not be? Like, for what reason? Let's see what they have to say. Oh, okay. Okay, I was wrong about the grammar. The Northern Ireland Executive. Okay, I didn't realise there was just one thing. This is what happens when I'm an ignorant English person talking about Northern Irish politics. But the Northern Ireland Executive has said that releasing the evidence that they considered when extending the ban on puberty blockers for those experiencing gender dysphoria would not be in the public interest. On balance, the department did not believe that it is in the public interest to release the information you have requested. It is essential that the department protects the concept of collective responsibility under which the executive committee operates, and that it protects the safe space within the committee to facilitate frank and honest considerations of options. They don't have any evidence. That's why they're not releasing it. They don't have to say who said it. I mean, the reality is that they would have made some political decision, some political calculation, and decided that for whatever reason, they're going to abandon trans children and throw them under the bus. Probably because one of the members of this board is gender critical, or they want to do a deal with some right-wing people, or something along those lines, and they won't have had any evidence. Evidence isn't ever coming into it when they're discussing banning anything for trans people. Evidence is just something that gets in the way because it never supports their positions. And so when you say like, oh, can you show me the evidence, and you're like, well, no, because then the discussion process will be compromised. It's like, well, that's not what we're asking for. We're not asking for like who said it. Maybe we should be, but we're asking on what basis, on what grounds do you have to ban this? And the answer is you don't have any grounds to ban this. Which is why... Sorry, just distracted. Which is why they can't give any evidence. And I just think that this whole thing is going to come out... I mean, well, we already know it's a scandal. But this whole thing is going to come out as a big scandal in like 20 or 30 years when the trans kids who are harmed by this are old enough to like be involved in politics. And it's going to come out that there was never any evidence. The whole Cass report was a sham. That there was loads of evidence showing that it would cause harm. And when trans people are no longer a culture issue, there'll be a single documentary about it saying that hundreds of people were harmed for life. And there'll be a little sweeping under the rug, and that'll be it. None of the people involved in this who have harmed children for their life will face any negative repercussions in their life. They don't have any sense of guilt about this at all. They don't care about trans people suffering. Yeah, and that's what it will be. Depressing. So, I can actually see that YouTube chat is doing lots of chatting, but I lost my little window saying about YouTube stuff. Wow, we're at 20,166 subscribers now. That's exciting. Just give me 1 second while I find this, and then we will do our next and maybe last thing, which is going to be a what you can do to help. Let's just get this thingy back up. Okay, great. I'm back. That wasn't a tech issue. That doesn't count. Stop talking about tech issues. Place a queue in chat if you want to stop. I don't know what's quite going on in chat at the moment. The dog ate my evidence. Yeah, I think that's true. It is a shameful time in history. It's pretty depressing. 16 trans kids are already dead because of puberty blocker ban. I don't know what the number is, but some will definitely die. I mean, that's just a fact. I saw someone talking about that today with the horror that's going on in the USA for trans people at the moment. About striking the balance. Actually, let's make this a segment. I don't need to share anything. Fuck it. Right. Next thing I want to talk about is balancing between the optimism and pessimism of our chances of surviving. I want to try and make this show a bit more positive in order to get people into the frame of mind where they can act and make the world a better place for themselves and other people around them. That doesn't mean mindlessly being optimistic to the point of delusion. That means looking at things rationally and one at a time and trying to see all of the negatives for what they really are and the positives for what they really are. And I've seen lots of different takes on, I was going to say on Twitter, on Blue Sky, about the chances of American trans people in the US, given the new Trump presidency. And some of it is pure raw panic, and I totally empathize with anyone who is in raw panic mode and is saying things like, we're fucked, we're cooked, game over, we've lost. I understand the fear, but I don't think that's helpful. I don't think you're achieving anything other than venting your own fear, and you're causing other people to fear, and it creates like a chain reaction of panic, which stops us from acting and doing anything. And it's not game over. And the reality is that trans people will survive, and they will still be here long after all of us here are dead, and long after Donald Trump and Keir Starmer and West Streeting and stuff are all dead too. Sorry, gosh. I'm running out of voice juice. But to say, oh, yeah, trans people are going to survive this, because we are, can easily overlook the reality that some trans people will not survive this. I hope that everyone watching this survives this. I hope that every trans person survives what's going on at the moment, survives the trans panic. But I already know that some haven't. Some of my friends have lost their lives to the trans panic. And I'm sure gender criticals will laugh at that because they always laugh when trans people die. But laugh at the idea that their hate movement has caused suffering because they don't think trans people suffering counts. But I do know trans people who have had ended their own lives due to a combination of abuse and harassment and the fear of the future and their rights and jobs and homes being taken away from them as a direct result of the trans panic, the gender critical movement, the Republicans. And that's going to happen. That there are going to be people who don't make it, and we should all be there for each other as best as we can, and reach out to people who you know. But we do need to strike a balance between these two things. We can't be all like terror panic, everyone's going to die, this is the end of it, trans people are eradicated, because that's just not true. But we also can't be like, oh, it's all going to be fine, it's all going to work out, because that's also not true. It's not going to be fine for the people who don't make it, and it's not going to be fine for the people who do make it, whose lives are ruined and who suffer directly because of it, which is going to be most of us are going to suffer to some degree, and already are. But I do think we need to really try and be as optimistic as we can so that we can keep fighting for the future. I'm not going to look at you and say, oh, it's all going to be fine, it'll all work out, you know, it's just going to be a few hiccups, because it's not. But I do believe that we will get to a position where the trans panic will die down and it will be over. I don't think that will end transphobia. I don't think we'll ever end sexism. I don't think we'll ever end irrational prejudice and hatred and stuff. I think it's just a core part of humans. Well, I think irrational hatred and prejudice is a core part of humans. I don't think transphobia or sexism are a core part of humans. But I do think that they are the most socially ingrained manifestations of irrational prejudice and hatred. And so, because they have thousands of years of momentum behind them, it'll be very hard to get rid of them entirely. But I think we can definitely lessen them in meaningful and material ways. And I think we'll do that best by, when some new news, horrible news happens, seeing it and being like, is this actually happening right now in the way they're describing it? Yes or no? If it's actually happening, if it's like, my local police force is rounding up all the trans people, fucking get out of there. But if it's more like, they're saying they want to make it so trans people can't update their passports, that doesn't mean panic and leave the country this second. It means, okay, they're threatening to do something, which they may or may not be able to achieve, but they've said their intentions, and I have at least some time to act on it. And when I see someone else panicking, what I can do is like grab them, shake them out of the panic, and say, come on, mate, right, what you need to do is sort your passport out. I've just done mine. Let me help you sort it out. Because I just think that's how we're gonna get through stuff. And not letting people spiral. Let people vent, but not spiral. You just got to draw the line yourselves on that. But right now, we are going to end on, because my voice is dying. We are going to end on something you can do to improve the world for trans people. I'm going to end on two things, in fact, you can do. The first thing you can do to improve trans people's lives right now, especially if you're a cis person, is reach out to a trans person in your life. Maybe you know a trans person. Maybe you're related to a trans person. Maybe there's one at your work. Maybe you only know trans people on the internet. Maybe you don't know any and this is the first video you've encountered. In which case, pick someone from the comments, send me a message, something. Don't just send it to me and the other big trans creators though, because we have loads of support. But certainly if you know a trans person who, you know, is just kind of an acquaintance and they're kind of nice or something, just reach out and just say, hey mate, it sucks what's happening. I support you. That you don't have to say, I'll house you if things go to shit. You don't have to say, here's a bunch of money. You don't have to say, I'm going to fight to make this right, because maybe you can't do those things. But even just knowing that there are people out there who support us and we're not on our own. Like, I'm in a position where I know that's true because I've got a really good support network of friends and family and other trans people, and I'm very hooked in and plugged into the community and stuff. There are lots of people who aren't. Maybe that trans person who works at the food court where you go to at lunchtime for work or something, maybe they have nothing. Like, they might not have the support network, and they might be living in absolute fear and thinking everyone around them hates them, because that's the vibe you might get from the news. And also there might be your close trans friends who you're not reaching out to because you think, oh yeah, well, you know, they know what's going on better than me. They're still panicking. Just reach out and be like, hey mate, I love you as a friend, don't forget it, something. Do that. But we're also going to talk about some action you can take that's a bit more direct action. So, in the UK, there is a lady called Zoe Watts who has gone to prison for making weapons without a license. I think even made a gun, had a bunch of knives. In the UK, that is not allowed. People are not allowed to make guns, and they're not allowed to have guns without a license, and they're not allowed to have certain types of knives. And I'm not going to get into that argument now, but I don't necessarily think that it's bad that we're not allowed guns, because America seems to have a lot of issues with them. Anyway, she did that for whatever reason. You can judge her positively or negatively, and you could think that she should face punishment or not. However, she is a trans woman who, in a sentencing, they said wasn't a danger. They don't think that she was a terrorist who was making these weapons to hurt people. They don't think she was, you know, going to get revenge on someone. From my understanding, it sounds like she's a prepper, or basically in a bit of a wacky hobbyist type who likes weapons. That's not my thing at all. I am not defending that position in the slightest. But they did say that she is not a danger to other prisoners. And she has a gender recognition certificate, which means she is legally female. And they said that she is not a danger to the other women prisoners. But because this is a political hot button topic at the moment, and the people in charge are either Keir Starmer types who do not care and don't want to make a fuss, don't want to have to talk about trans issues, or they're Wes Streeting types who are gender critical dickheads who want to cause trans people suffering, she has been put in a men's prison where they have acknowledged she is in danger. So, just to be clear, they said she isn't a danger to society, but she is doing something that is bad, which you can make your own decision on. They then said she is not a danger to female prisoners. She is not a sex criminal, nothing like that. Then they also said she is in danger in the men's prison. And so the solution is to put her in the men's prison, but to put her in solitary confinement, which, by the way, is torture. And not just like, oh, it's bad, you know, it's torturous. Oh, I have to walk up a hill. It's torture. As in, literally, putting people in solitary confinement is considered torture, because it drives you mad. It's horrific. Because like it's politically inconvenient. That is against the law, by the way. She has to be kept in a women's prison unless she is a danger to the other women prisoners, which she is not. So what you can do on Saturday, this Saturday, the 25th, is phone up the number here and say, here's a suggested script. I am calling with concerns over the treatment of Zoe Watts, a trans woman being illegally held in the men's healthcare wing despite having provided her gender recognition certificate. I am demanding she is moved to the women's prison immediately, as per the government's guidelines, and that HMP Peterborough resume her access to life-saving prescription medications, estrogen, and sertraline. Something very easy to do if you're in the UK. You could, and you don't want to do a phone call, you could still join in. You could write a letter. You could turn up to a protest. I'm sure they'll organise a protest. This Instagram page, I don't really rate Instagram. I deleted my Instagram. But they have information on this. I am not saying I support what she did, or even I'm not saying whether she should or shouldn't be in prison. I don't know anything about that at all. Some trans people do commit crimes. That's just true. And I am currently not having a position on prison abolition. I'm not taking a stand on that, and you can say that's cowardly or not. That is fine. I do not mind. But why I'm taking an issue on here, a stand on here, is that they have put a woman in the men's prison, despite that being against the law, dangerous, and the way in which they've done it is torture. And I think that that's a very easy position to take, because it is just unambiguously immoral and dangerous. So here's a very easy thing you can do. This will take you 2 minutes, and it's good to just be aware. So get involved. Let's try and always have something we can get involved with every week. Yes. So someone in the comments here saying depriving a person of life-saving medication is not a punishment in any way. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's against like international laws. You shouldn't be torturing prisoners. I mean, taking away medication, whether it's antidepressants or transition medication or insulin or cancer treatment, is a cruel and unnecessary punishment. If someone breaks the law and you're in a position where you support them going to jail, then going to jail is the punishment, isn't it? Like that's the whole point, right? So why are you also taking the healthcare? Are you taking insulin away from everyone? So the people who don't need insulin as a medication, are you like extracting it from them? For cis people, are you forcing them to medically transition? Because otherwise, it just seems like you're just forcing trans people through an extra cruel and unnecessary punishment. Going to prison is the punishment. Forced medical transition, either as a cis person to transition or as a trans person to transition back, is evil. And it's a form of torture, and so is solitary confinement. It's completely unacceptable, and you can make a scene and hopefully force them to do something about it. So, yeah, my voice is dying. We've been on air for 2 hours. I don't know how I did 3 hours last week. I think I need, like, lozenges or something to talk for this long. I didn't even do that much talking at work today. But, yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe these, like, lights dry out the air or something. I have a lot of studio lights, to be honest. It's quite bright in here. Often tricks my brain into thinking it's, like, lunchtime in June. So I always feel like when I finish these shows, I'm like, right, time for lunch. And it's like 10 p.m. here. But yeah, I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you stay sane and just try and stay some form of optimistic. I know if you're looking at the reality of the world, like don't be delusional. Don't stick your head in the sand all the time. But it's okay to stick your head in the sand some of the time, and sometimes that keeps you sane in a way that then allows you to process the information better, be more rational in the future, and to act better for yourself and other people. I've probably said this like 4 times on this stream now. I just really think it's important, and I'm saying it as much for me as I am anyone else. Yeah, maybe I should just have some tea or something. I gotta find something. It's just, it feels really dry when I'm talking. I don't normally get this, to be honest. But it happened last week as well. Just wonder if it's room. Don't know. Yeah, I think Zoe is a former police officer. That is true. And she, yes, made an explosive. I think that is also true. I don't know 100%. Don't quote me on it. But I do seem to remember reading that. Yes, you can't pull from an empty cup. I always think that the aeroplane analogy of like when the oxygen masks come down, you should put your own one on first before helping someone else who's struggling, because if you try and help someone else first, then you might not have enough oxygen and you might pass out, and then you're both fucked. Whereas if you get your own one on first and can breathe, even if the other person has passed out, you can put the mask on them, and that might be enough to keep them alive. So I think that like applies to trans rights too. Go to your own fucking Pokemon tournaments and come back happy and fulfilled and ready to go, and then you can do multiple hour stream and stay up to like 3 a.m. tonight editing all the videos, and you'll have energy to do it without going insane. Yeah, it looks like we've got some argument going on in the comments. Good stuff. What I would like to do is find some better videos to react to. Maybe we'll do one a week. And find some gender critical arguments and directly address them. And then deal with some of the news. I think that would be a really good mix. That's kind of what I tried to do this week, but maybe we can get something that's not several months old for the video to react to. So if you've got any ideas, send them to me. And maybe we can get some... Well, this week's gender critical argument was fine. From Harvey Jenny or Jenny Harvey or whatever her name is. But yeah, I think I'm going to call it now. I need to get an outro for this. So I can click it so I know when it's finished. I'm going to set up the outro. Next week we're going to have our outro on the live stream. But yep. Bye everyone. I'm going now. See you later. I think I have to wait a few seconds of silence to make sure YouTube doesn't cut the end off. So I'm going to go back to the starting soon screen. But it's not starting soon, we're ending.